language, which is sociological to be sure, and our habits and our relationships. All these are different. They can very well be understood as constraints. And most of the other traditions would say the only way you can be liberated is try to, not just to overcome, but to transcend all these constraints. I think there's a measure of that in the Confucian tradition. But a more interesting thing, which again different from many other traditions, is the whole idea of transforming these constraints into instruments of self-realization. Instead of eliminating them, which is radical, or transcend them, which is possible, or at least to minimize their importance and try to understand yourself. And the Confucian idea is to try to transform them into vehicles of self-realization. So the term I use, which is now accepted by a number of other people as useful, is the enabling constraints. In other words, constraints are not constraints, they are enabling. Enabling is for you to develop new constraints. The third dimension, which normally is ignored by humanism, I still use the word humanism, as you know. And many people immediately associate humanism with what we call secular humanism. Concerned about the world here now rather than the world beyond. Concerned about life rather than death. Concerned about your involvement in the world rather than the ultimate meaning of life beyond. Most people would consider that. I think each one of them, we can argue, that is comparable to the Confucian concern, but fundamentally different. I don't want to go into this now, but this idea of transforming our constraints into instruments of self-realization, therefore constraints can be understood as enabling constraints, forces us to recognize the importance of our environment, especially nature. Now we can say earth. Confucius made a choice. You are part of the human being, so you consider the earth, consider it as your home, our proper home. It is not this shore that need to be overcome in order to get to the other shore. It's not the defied world where we should get to the pure land. It is not the secular or profane world. We wait for the kingdom of God here to come. It is our home, a proper home. Now, by implication, this earth as our proper home, by implication, the body is our proper home. We don't, sometimes body is considered as a prison house of the soul. I mentioned that before. It's not at all. The body is the proper home for the soul. And therefore the cultivation, self-cultivation, in many cases in Chinese, simply say the cultivation of the body, the cultivation of the self. This notion about cultivation is critical. And the idea of a possible, sustainable, harmonious relationship between human species and nature for the sake of not only human survival, but human flourishing. Without this environment, that human flourishing would not be possible. And the fourth dimension is the Confucian idea of heaven. Many people say, what is the Confucian idea of heaven? And how is heaven different from God and other kind of what we call God terms, like Brahman or Logos. And this is something I cannot answer, or I cannot spend the time to offer my own view. But in a very simple way, that heaven and human form a mutuality, even mutual responsiveness. And because the emergence of the human already changed the relationship between heaven and humans. In many other traditions, we do not know heaven, we do not know God, because of human rationality is not good enough to do that. The Confucian idea is not only we should know, we're capable of knowing. Of course our knowing is partial. We can even deal with destructive forces that seems to come from heaven. But at the same time, we are, human beings, in the doctrine of the Ming in particular, can not only take part in heaven as an observer, as an appreciator, but human beings can be understood as co-creators of the heavenly process. So we are human beings, we are not only psychological beings, we are social beings, political beings, but we are also cosmic beings. And in a very extreme way, we can say anything we do, even in the privacy of our home, is not only sociologically significant, socially significant, politically significant, it's even cosmically significant. And this idea is not at all different from the Buddhist idea of karma. If you think either positive thought or negative thought, that thinking itself is consequential. And that's also in Christian idea. Some of these monks, they're not doing anything. They just pray, they just meditate. But society's meaning of life is being enhanced by their presence, because they represent the highest level of devotion, of faith, which should be something that we emulate. Even if we do things in the world, in the classical sense, we do things in the world in order to glorify God, not simply to express our greedy ideas. So all these are comparable, but the Confucian position is very, not radical, is very, I call it reasonable. In other words, we can think about it.